and welcome to day 3 of the 4th SEMIO SPAFA International Conference on Southeast Asian Archaeology and Fine Arts, otherwise known as SPAFACON2021. A special warm welcome to our distinguished speakers for today's presentations. Very nice to see all of you here. And to our audience joining the conference on Facebook Live and on Zoom, we are so happy to have you here with us. Today we have 2 sessions, sessions 3.1 and 3.2, both of which are under the theme of conservation and traditions. To our audience, please let us know where you are joining us from, and later during presentations, if you have questions for our presenters, please submit your questions in the comment section if you're joining us on Facebook Live. And if you're joining us via Zoom, please leave your questions in the Q&A box. We, the SEMIO Regional Center for Archaeology and Fine Arts, otherwise known as SPAFA, turns 50 this year. So we are celebrating our 50th anniversary by gifting our audience with a SPAFA 50th anniversary souvenir based on those questions that you submit to the presenters. So please keep those questions coming. And as mentioned earlier, today's talks are under the theme of conservation and traditions. So therefore, today's moderator is SPAFA's specialist in cultural heritage conservation, Dr. Hattaya Siri Patanakun. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Hattaya. Dr. Hattaya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. Good morning and perhaps good afternoon, everybody from the other parts of the world as well. John already introduced me. Thank you very much. As he mentioned, today we have 2 sessions. We will start the first session with a very interesting paper by Rhayan Gatbonton Melendres, who is an assistant professor at the University of the Philippines Diliman Extension Program in Pandemya. He obtained his BA psychology degree in UP Pandemya in 2001. Then he completed his MA in archaeology at the Archaeological Studies program in UP Diliman in 2008. Recently, he is finishing his PhD in archaeology in the same institution. In addition, he is a new associate member of the National Research Council of the Philippines. Congratulations. And his research interests include Philippines archaeology, Philippine and Asian pottery studies, ceramic ethno archaeology, cultural resource management, and heritage management. And today he will give a presentation on the after 30 years and during a pandemic, pottery production and distribution and in Bagacay, Talibon, Bohol, Central Philippines. Rhayan, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning everyone. Magandang umaga mula sa Pilipinas. The title of my presentation is After 30 Years and During a Pandemic, Pottery Production and Distribution in Bagacay, Talibon in the island of Bohol in the Philippines. Next, please. Presently, there are 4 communities in Bohol that continue to make traditional pottery. These are the villages of Bagacay in Talibon, Binugawan in Calape, Canduao Occidental in Valencia, and East Poblacion in Albuquerque. This study focuses on the village of Bagacay, Talibon, which is on the northern part of the islands. Next, please. In 1986, SEMIO SPAFA conducted a training workshop in Ethno Archaeology in Bagacay, Talibon from July 22 to September 22. Mary Jane Calderon and Telma Ruales, who attended the course, wrote an article for the SPAFA Digest in 1987 to describe the village pottery making tradition. This article listed the different pottery types and their functions. They discussed the champ opératoire of pottery making from raw material acquisition to firing the pots. They recorded and explained the different forming techniques used by the potters from pinching, coiling, paddle and anvil to coiling. Next, please. After 30 years, I revisited and conducted pottery studies in Bagacay, Talibon, pre-pandemic in 2017 and 2018, and during the pandemic in 2021. I identified the pottery community's ceramic production, organization, and distribution changes. Specifically for this presentation, I will show you the changes in the potter's population, ceramic vessel forms, forming techniques, firing technology, social organization, and distribution mechanism for the past 30 years. I will also highlight the changes in the pottery village during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next, please. This study is part of my Bohol Ethno Archaeology project that is being funded by the University of the Philippines. Next, please. The 1986 Simeo SPAFA training data was based on the article written by Mary Jane Calderon and Telma Ruales. I gathered additional clarification information from Telma Ruales via phone interview this May and September. Next, please. For the more recent data, I use a multitude of research methods. We gathered the pottery data for the pre-pandemic in 2017 and 2018, and at the height of the pandemic in March to May 2021 through survey interviews, participant observation, photo, audio, and video documentation, and detailed field notes. Next, please. For this research, we interviewed all the potters of Talibon using a survey questionnaire with the help of my local research assistants. The questionnaire is a modified and translated version of Owen Rye's pottery technology datasheet and checklist. Next, please. I use participant observation to study how Talibon potters collect and prepare their raw materials, form their pots, fire their pots, and of course, how they sell them. We took photographs, video, audio recordings, and field notes with proper consent from the potters. Next, please. Next, please. In 2021, during this pandemic, we strictly adhered to COVID-19 health protocols to conduct the study. We secured a research permit from the local government unit first. We used face masks during interviews. We followed proper social distancing rule, and we only conduct the interviews when there were 0 COVID cases or no suspected COVID case in the village for safety. Next, please. Now we go to the result of the study. The number of pottery households in Bagacay, Talibon increased over time. During the 1986 Simeo SPAFA training, 10 families manufactured traditional pottery in the village. Before the pandemic in 2018, there was 13 family-based pottery production where the potters are related by blood or marriage and they live in one house or one compound. During this pandemic, this April 2021, the number increased to 23, which is a 77% increase in the total number of pottery households in the village. Before the pandemic, many families in Talibon had different works and places of employment. But because of community quarantine, they had to return home for safety, and unfortunately, some of them had to go back because they lost their jobs. As a result, more Talibon potters returned to pottery making as demands and prices for cooking pots, clay stoves, and flower pots increased. Next, please. The number of potters in Talibon fluctuates over time. For example, in 1986, Calderon and Ruales reported 51 potters. However, the study did not mention how many men or boys and women or men there are in the village. Telma Ruales cannot accurately recall the sex profile of potters in Talibon in 1986. In 2018, there were 28 active potters in Talibon. 15 were males and 13 were females. There was a marked increase in the number of potters in Talibon in 2021 during the pandemic. From 28 potters, the number of potters surges to 72, which is a 157 increase in the total of number of potters in the community. Of the 72 potters during this pandemic, 33 are males and 39 are females. Next, please. Aside from the increase in the demand for cooking pots, clay stoves, and flower pots, the surge in the number of potters in Talibon during the pandemic can be attributed to the increase of potter ages 20 and below. From 0 or none in 2018, the number increased to 25. Most Talibon children and teens are at home during the community quarantine in Bohol, as face-to-face learning in school was prohibited by the Philippine government. Therefore, they help their parents make pots to augment their family income and to fight boredom. This new development is significant in the continuity of the pottery tradition in Talibon, as young ones are motivated to learn how to make pots because they saw that pottery making is profitable. Next, please. The raw material acquisition in Talibon has not changed. The Talibon potters use local clay, mainly from their backyards or lands. It is not unusual to see holes being dug around their houses. Next, please. Potters mine their clay themselves or their relatives using a sharp implement. They put the clay in sacks and carry it to their production areas. The temper that they use is the clay with sand found underneath the clay layer. The Talibon potters call it bas or anapog, which literally means sand or limestone. Next, please. The Talibon potters use local fuels such as coconut leaves and stems, coconut nuts, various types of wood, and rice hay. If they do not own coconut or wood trees, they buy them from others. The rice hay is for free, but they usually give a cooking pot or clay stove to rice field owner as a gift. Next, please. Pottery production or workshop in Talibon can be found inside their house, below their homes, a small space at the back of their houses, or they build a small work area inside their backyards. Next, please. Traditional ceramics are handmade in Talibon and all over Bohol. Boholano potters, like the Talibon potters, use only mats, wood blocks, banana leaves, broken pots for rotational devices and pot holders, small bottles for burnishing, fish net and dried banana leaves for polishing, and wet cloth, wooden paddles, bamboo stick, and stone anvil for shaping. They do not use a potter's wheel nor molds in forming their potteries. Next, please. Clay and temper are mixed manually using their hands, but sometimes even using their feet. Next, please. The traditional pots in Talibon are open-fired in a vacant space in their backyard or in the village. Talibon potters share firing platforms with their relatives and neighbors. They do not use a kiln. In Talibon, firing is a family or a group activity where everyone, including the children, arranges the pots and fuel in the firing platform. Next, please. The ceramic repertoire of traditional Talibon potters is almost the same for the past 30 years. For example, in 1986, Calderon and Ruales recorded 15 different types of ceramics in the area. However, by 2018, 2 ceramic forms had disappeared because the potters stopped creating them. These are tatso, a shallow pot for cooking peanut, and tinghoy, or pots for melting gold. Metal pots replaced the pots for cooking peanuts, while pots for melting gold disappeared when gold production on the island ceased. Next, please. So these are the most commonest, go back, please. These are the commonest, previous slide, please. These are the most common ceramic type in Talibon. So you have flower pots, cooking pots, and clay stoves. And these are the type that are regularly being made by the potters. Next, please. The following ceramic types are only made when customers orders for them, or they're being made sometimes, but not all the time. This includes a clay steamer, a water jar, a clay pitcher, pots for cooking rice, and pots for making rice cake. Next, please. Once in a while, they also make figurines and coin banks and toys for children. Next, please. Now, one of the families in Talibon who learned pottery making from Cebu, from the island nearby, but using molds, they make red bricks, pots for feeding animals, as well as flower pots, but this time using a mold. Next, please. Okay, so according to the potters, they've been making the same ceramic type, but during this pandemic, the following are the best sellers in a way. So these are different kinds of flower pots. And the potters told me that they even, because they were highly in demand, they even had to be creative. So they came up with different designs and styles so to entice the clients or the customer. Next, please. People also started to cook local cuisines. That's why the demand for cooking pots, and the next one, please, and clay stoves surges. Next, please. Now, we go to the distribution mechanisms. Talibon potters use different modes of distribution to circulate and sell their products. They have employed the exact marketing and distribution mechanism from the 1980s. The only difference is the intensity of how they utilized it from time to time. Calderon and Roales did not mention any distribution system in their article. However, I obtained this data by asking the old potters in 2017 and 2018 if their parents or they had been doing the same distribution strategies from the 1980s. And as you can see from this table, there are the number 7 and number 8 system are the one that are vanishing. Next, please. The potters have been selling pots every Sunday during market day or tabo or tabuan in Talibon. They also peddle pottery in nearby towns on the respective market days. In this mechanism, the potters display their products in one corner of the market, church, or town center. However, this was discouraged this pandemic to protect the potters from getting infected from the COVID-19 virus. Before the pandemic, the potters sold their products almost every week. This pandemic, they only do it at least once a week. Next, please. All of the Talibon potters sell their pottery to pottery resellers or comprador. A comprador is sometimes a potter themselves, such as the case of these two potters of Talibon. In some cases, the comprador is not even from the pottery village. Next, please. All potters accept orders from store owners and customers in Talibon and nearby towns. They usually use a tricycle like this one that you can see on the slide to deliver their wares to these nearby places but for a fee. Sometimes people from nearby islands also order cooking pots and clay stoves from them. If this is the case, they deliver their products to the port of Talibon, and then the pottery are loaded to boats. Next, please. Potters living near the main highway of Talibon also show their products in front of their houses for passers-by. In this pandemic, the Talibon potters prefer to sell to comprador, accept orders from customers, and transport the pots to client because the chance of contracting the virus is lesser. After all, the face-to-face interaction in these methods are limited. Next, please. Two of the most interesting distribution system in Talibon are bailo or bailoan or bartering pots and suroy-suroy or itinerant selling. In bailo, the potters exchange their pots for other items, mainly for rice, root crops, and marine resources. Next, please. In Valencia Bohol, one clay stove is exchanged for 10 kilos of rice, while one clay stove can be swapped for 6 kilos of corn. Some potters exchange one water jug for one sack of unhusked rice or 50 kilos of unhusked rice. Next, please. Manang Perla of Talibon before the pandemic used to exchange her pots for fresh and dried fish, shellfish, and other marine resources from the people of nearby islands. However, unlike in Valencia, the exchange rate is based on our modern monetary system, meaning if a clay stove is worth 150 pesos, it will be exchanged with dried fish worth almost the same. Next, please. In the 1980s and before, potters also practiced suroy-suroy or itinerant vending. In this marketing strategy, potters transport their products and walk all over a village to sell or barter their pots. In 2018, no one was already doing this in this village. During this pandemic, the local government unit prohibited the potters from doing this actually. Next, please. Okay, I believe this is my second to the last slide. Pottery making in Bagacay, Talibon is resilient to change, except in one family, and it's in this particular pottery workshop. This family is the only pottery production in Talibon with different forming techniques, firing technology, and social organization. The family introduced new means to form and fire pots. The potter's son worked in a pottery workshop in Cebu in the 1980s. In Cebu, he learned how to make pots using molds and potter's wheel. After some time, he went back to Bagacay, Talibon and introduced these new techniques. However, they are the only ones that adapted to this forming and firing technology. Aside from this, they are the only family that hired potters to work for them. All of the potters in Talibon are independent specialists and are family-based. Some of the potters in this particular family are attached artisans. Aside from being not locals of Talibon, they work for a fixed salary. Next, please. So this is a picture of the lone kiln in Talibon, Bohol. And my last slide, please. Next, please. So you see, the pottery making in Bagacay, Talibon is highly resilient, no? Except in one family, the potters continue to use the traditional way of firing the pots. So the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted our lives, but surprisingly, it has a positive effect on pottery making in Talibon. First, there was a marked increase in potter household, potters, and new young potters in the village. Second, pottery making gave additional income to several families in the community. Third, it motivated young people to learn the art of pottery making. And fourth, it gave both the pottery producer and consumer productive yet safe activity during this pandemic. And that will be all. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Rhayan. It's very interesting. And your presentation make us like to visit Bohol.
Yes.
Yeah, able.
A beautiful island with beautiful beach and
Yes,
beautiful topography.
Yes, and it's very interesting, the pottery production. I myself personally really like this kind of activity. So the next paper for this session is the heritage education in Myanmar. It will be presented by Dr. Charlotte Galloway, who is an honorary associate professor at the Australian National University. With over 20 years research experience in Myanmar, she has been involved in numerous heritage and museum objects, including the preparation of the UNESCO World Heritage nomination dossier for Pakan. Dr. Galloway is an experienced educator and has been a visiting faculty in the Department of Archaeology at the University of Yangon. This paper is jointly prepared by Susu, President of ICOMOS Myanmar, Thant Shwin, founder of Mandalay Heritage Society, Ohmmar, President of Myanmar Archaeology Association, Dr. Elizabeth Moore from Emeritus Professor from SOAS University of London, and Dr. Galloway herself. So Dr. Galloway, may I give the floor to you, please?
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. And is that all correct on your end? Are you seeing the correct screen? Good, thank you. As is customary in Australia, I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, who are the traditional custodians on the land of which I currently am on, and pay respects to the elders of the Ngunnawal nation, both past and present. I am presenting today on behalf of my co-authors, and I'm hoping Dr. Susu, if she has been able to join in today, she will be available to answer questions during the question session. So on behalf of my co-authors, I thank the organisers for accepting our paper and giving us the opportunity to present our concepts for heritage education in Myanmar. All of us have been involved in Myanmar's World Heritage Sites in various roles, as members of site management committees, as academic and research experts, running capacity building activities, and other project-based heritage activities. Heritage education in Myanmar is an important subject. Myanmar now has 2 UNESCO World Heritage sites, the Pew Ancient Cities, listed in 2014, and the ancient capital of Bagan, listed in 2019. The sites are complex. The Pew Ancient Cities consist of 3 archaeological regions. At Halin and Bekthano are at more remote areas, and Sri Kshetra, which is a living site close to the major city of Phrae, which is expanding. The heritage area of Bagan is a very large site with 3,595 monuments, 8 component areas, and is also a living site with 7 villages and 2 towns. These are also expanding and include some of the heritage listed sites within their boundaries. Management of the sites in accordance with the approved development plans is proving very difficult. Development controls are often ineffective, and there have been no real testing of laws that were introduced to stop unauthorized activities within the sites, particularly at Bagan. This includes expanding residential areas, so product also of increased tourism and visitation to the sites, hotel expansions, road upgrading, most under the authority of local and regional governments, through new plantings around monuments and donor-funded renovations inside temples. These are sometimes under the control of local pagoda trustees and village communities, which makes, as I said, quite a complex site to manage. The measures put in place to problem solve some of these issues are often not very well thought through, as seen here in a couple of these slides. This was an attempt a couple of years ago to manage traffic at Bagan through the main entrance at Tharaba Gate, which I think, as we know, we can see it's a pretty invasive way of trying to stop buses in this case and going through the gates and directing traffic one way. But there was very little sort of cooperation between or discussion with local communities who were very much affected by this change in traffic arrangements and so on. This has now been sort of changed with another one-way type of road system. Also at Bagan, we still have now within this World Heritage Zone, it is a living site. So we still have traditional farming activities happening. And as we can see, the goat nicely positioned on the 1,000-year-old wall that's still standing there. So management, and how we sort of transition to maintain the sites while still allowing living activities is quite a challenge. And these are all, as I said, about community activities. This is just a photo at Orza village, which is right near the site museum at Sri Kshetra. And this has become the dropping off place for all tour buses where people have to go to smaller vehicles to travel around the site. And that's seen in these interventions of barriers to control traffic, expansion of local shops and so on. I mean, these just weren't there 3 or 4 years ago. So these are all activities where the community are directly sort of involved, but the management plans and understanding of what impact this might have on heritage is not so well understood. Other issues we have is there's a lot of working across official government departments, and also working with community is actually a relatively new concept in Myanmar. And while World Heritage listing is generally seen as a positive outcome for these sites, there is little expertise in Myanmar to adequately manage these types of activities. And under the overarching control of the Department of Archaeology and Museums within the Ministry of Religious Affairs and Culture, There has been capacity activities building for staff to manage the sites, but most of the efforts have been directed at technical skills to maintain the tangible heritage. And this is really why developing heritage education is so important in Myanmar. Our presentation is focusing on community education. And while formal heritage courses are needed at university level, these will take time to develop and implement. At Bagan, there is a strong need for engaging with community as they are integrated into the site through various Buddhist practices and ceremonies that have existed for over a millennia. Yet local engagement is poorly understood by either side, the official government-paid managers or the local inhabitants. By developing skills in community groups, this also helps address the low levels of funding available to employ more staff in the Department of Archaeology. With the right directions, each group will learn from each other. Local villagers can inform department staff about local histories and how sites are used, which will ensure site management plans consider local needs, not just those of the monuments. And department staff can train local temple custodians in the correct ways to undertake basic maintenance and when to report issues with sites and monuments. This will go a long way to help the department manage all of the over 3,000 individual heritage monuments, an impossible task with current staffing levels and without local support. This lack of resources, both in skilled personnel and financial support, is well recognised and is an issue across the country as more and more groups start to take an interest in their local heritage. Yet there has simply been no time to develop the strategies necessary to make heritage education a field of study in the higher education space. This is, though, a long-term goal and will ensure that Myanmar can independently support heritage management into the future. While a skilled professional workforce is an ideal future goal, in parallel, it is essential that there is broader community education and training. Since gaining World Heritage listing, there have been many heritage capacity building activities in Myanmar, though most participants are those working within government departments. There is genuine enthusiasm for learning how to look after heritage, and while these workshops and programs are very helpful, there is no long-term coordinated development of heritage management skills. There is strong evidence to show that in Myanmar, communities are very interested in their heritage, as evidenced by the growing number of community groups that have organised themselves since government activities in their heritage space have increased. Even so, there is still a low level of understanding within communities about what heritage means, what its significance is, and how they can participate in its safeguarding. In planning short and medium-term activities for heritage training and engagement with community, we have asked informally how some heritage groups have formed, the type of people who have joined these groups, and what their goals are. We have also asked about their perceived needs and pressing issues. In response, we have considered how they can be supported to upskill their abilities in local site preservation, to work in tandem with an already resource-stretched department staff. Informal survey indicates that there are different types of community groups, and what we see on screen is not a comprehensive listing, but is the sort of main grouping. We have a regional town and heritage groups, urban heritage organisations, community heritage trusts, ethnic-based cultural heritage groups, professional groups, and product-based and intangible cultural heritage groups. And we have just here just some examples of these organisations and how they've, some of them have come into being. Some groups have proven more effective than others. Characteristics for effective community engagement in heritage organisations and the longevity of the groups have been identified as whether they've been established independently from official government organisations, and with effective group government liaison, whether they have financial support, and that can come from either internally or external to Myanmar, engagement with international and local heritage experts to determine their goals and objectives and deliver training to ensure the groups can be self-sustaining, and that there are also good relationships established with local administration to also just establish mutual understanding and cooperation. Most importantly, there is a degree of mutual trust and respect between these more effective community groups and official administration. In our written paper, we outline some successful and less successful endeavours to link community and official activities. As an example of a successful group, the Sri Kshetra Heritage Trust, which was founded in 2013, has proven to be quite effective in linking community with official site management. And here we just have some illustration here of the Sri Kshetra Heritage Trust is located within the Shwin Library and Museum in Phrae, which was established many years ago and has strong community support. It is also houses, as you can see in the background of one of the images, some artifacts. This has been a place where people who have found some artifacts around Sri Kshetra and for various reasons, I suppose historical reasons, have not felt comfortable taking them to the site museum, the official government site museum. They've often taken them here for safekeeping. And this has been a sort of ongoing tradition. As such, the Shwin Library and Museum, the management committee rather of the Sri Kshetra Heritage Trust, actually links the community members with the Field School of Archaeology, which is based near Morza village, just outside Phrae. And in particular, representatives from the well-known and well-regarded Shwin Library and Museum are on this committee. And the Field School has already established a respectful collaborative relationship with this group. So both groups work together as the World Heritage nomination was submitted to form the Sri Kshetra Heritage Trust. And we're able to communicate the role of the trust to the broader community. And through community knowledge, correct behaviours within the heritage zone were encouraged and the value of preserving heritage could be explained. And not long after the listing, there were numerous visits, of course. I mean, here we have one with the then Deputy Minister of Culture, but they made great efforts to bring community groups to the site and actually be walked around, taken around the site and have things explained to them. The site museum has a lot of really good didactic material, but to also explain what the value of this heritage is, and it seems to have worked very well. And just another example, while we're focusing on Phrae and Bagan, there are, as I mentioned, been a real burgeoning of other heritage activities in Myanmar in the last 5 years. And this was just a recent, just an example from the Mandalay Heritage Society and with ICOMOS that organised a program to look at traditional architecture and decorative arts programs, which also helps engage the community with understanding issues to do with heritage. And again, this works well. And just another example here, many of the regional cultural museums and smaller museums are now putting up, as I said, educational material, which again is a great way of communicating to the public some of the value of not only just built heritage, but also natural heritage, and also just of the amazing sort of depth of resources, historic resources that are in Myanmar. And this one just showing about all the stone, bronze and Iron Age sites map. A less successful example of linking community and officialdom is seen at Bagan. Site management involves multiple regional and national government departments and many local and commercial interests. Many small independent groups have organised themselves. Activities are fragmented. For example, one group is focused only on removal of plastics from the site. The Hotel and Tourism Association and Bagan Development Trust are formed, but the aims and objectives of these groups are not really well known. ICOMOS Myanmar, another nationally registered professional organisation, has up until the last several months advised on some site management cases. The Bagan Heritage Trust was organised officially in 2014. The members have strong technical expertise in monument conservation, but the Trust does not have sufficient multidisciplinary expertise to develop or enact long-term heritage management strategies. And I just put this slide up. This was the last international meeting before everything shut down with COVID, of course. And it's very typical, you know, it's an important meeting. We have many international donors here that are involved in renovation projects at Bagan, a lot of conversation about approaches to heritage management, but there is virtually no community representation in these meetings. So it's very hard to communicate to them what is happening at sites and why. So our informal discussions indicate some key factors that inhibit effective long-term community management. The main ones are a lack of knowledge of heritage best practices and the benefits good heritage management can bring to the community, a lack of funding and poor coordination between community and official groups. By far the most common issue is a lack of knowledge about contemporary best practice for heritage management amongst community members. Lack of financial support also inhibits group activities. There is also frustration among some community groups who see the authorities as being ineffective in enforcing local heritage laws. In the current pandemic environment, global travel restrictions are likely to continue for some time, and return of tourists to Myanmar will be slow. We propose that this is a very good time to address some of these problems. In the absence of many tourists, there should be more time for strong engagement between government staff with heritage expertise and community groups. Training activities, including basic monument maintenance and documentation, can occur. Community organisations need some financial support to ensure that they are sustainable. This funding could come from private companies, businesses, and also individuals. Ideally, there would be a small community grant program which would have focused community group activities and encourage them to see long-term benefits. While these actions are not new to many, they are new to Myanmar. Myanmar has some specific challenges to overcome, including complex hierarchical structures that exist within official administration. Also, there is no history of government support for community groups or models for effectively integrating them into local and regional heritage management. Second is the complex issue of management of Buddhist sites. The Sangha has an important role to play in ensuring that local donations and merit-making actions are undertaken in an appropriate way. And for this to happen, effort must be made to educate the Sangha about heritage best practices and its benefits. And they in turn can help educate community groups. And we have had some discussions about this in senior monks in Myanmar. And this is a typical example here of a contemporary restoration of a central Buddha shrine image. We all know that this is part of a natural history of Buddhism, but there's usually no documentation to record how these restorations occur, who did them, who was planning them, how they were carried out, what materials were being used, and so on. And just engagement with the community through the Buddhist monks should help develop better heritage management practices. Another example here was recent damage to temples following this year's heavy rains has reinforced the need for better public skills in education and heritage management. And the cleaning of debris of the recent collapse of the southern part of the main structure of one of the monuments, Monument 801, on 31st of August this year, which was done by local volunteers and authorities, actually didn't follow the ICROM guidelines and all the available information that was at hand, and may have caused more problems that will need future rectification. linking heritage management, and just as another example, linking heritage management to here, when people have said are very keen to engage, and this is just one example too, where local community were involved. Many Buddhist artifacts are often found lying around close by to temples or within temple grounds, but even understanding that they can be moved into a sheltered space to avoid more weathering and keep them protected. Once people know why they're doing it, they're very active and very interested and engaged. But it's this sort of basic level of education that we need to promote further. So that was really to do with the last one is, and also linking heritage management to sustainability is also a new challenge. With widespread economic hardship due to the lack of tourism likely to continue, ideas for creating alternative income sources is essential. And at present, Bagam will benefit from engaging local communities in site repair and maintenance. And if the community can be convinced that repairing the site now and making it ready for the return of tourists is beneficial, then this would be a great achievement and a way of linking community with local authorities in a sustainable way. And just because I want to put my last slide on, it doesn't want to go, but there we go. So to conclude, it is through community that most tourists, foreign and local, experience Myanmar. Equipping community groups with the skills needed to engage with local heritage and communicate the significance of their heritage to others is the best way to ensure that heritage assets remain protected, nurtured, and allowed to thrive. Achieving sustainable community engagement requires understanding the value of heritage to the local community and to Myanmar culture broadly. The full potential for successful site management can only be achieved when there is strong relationships between authorities and community groups. This must be inclusive and consider the diverse needs of community and the heritage site itself. Long term, it is necessary to have formal training and qualifications for heritage professionals in Myanmar, but in the short term, there is opportunity to raise community awareness of heritage management, a crucial step in developing sustainability and resilience for Myanmar's rich cultural heritage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Galloway. It's very interesting, and your presentation also recall us the memory when we were at Myanmar, particularly at the last technical meeting. We were there as well. So actually, for the Q&A, we will come back after the presenters already finished the presentation. So thank you very much, Dr. Galloway. So the next paper, which is the last paper for session 3.1, is the paper on, as my father said, traditional boat building in Pasuruan, East Java, which will be presented by two presenters. Agni Mokhtar is from the Regional Agency for Archaeological Research in DI, Yogyakarta Province, Indonesia. She will have a co-presenter, which is her colleagues, R.A. VB, R.A. Ginanja Punawibawa, right? So Agni, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fasana. I will share my screen first. Please bear with me for a few minutes. Can you all see it clearly, and can you hear me clearly? Okay. Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depends on wherever you are joining us today. Selamat pagi. My name is Agni Mokhtar, and this morning together with Wibi or Ginajar Purnawibawa, we will present on behalf of our team our work of documenting the traditional boat building tradition in Pasuruan, East Java. Before we start, I would like to thank the organizer for having us here today. And I would like to address that our team consists of people from several institutions, but the project itself was funded by the Regional Agency for Archaeological Research in Yogyakarta Province in Indonesia. For the outline, generally we will present about the background of the project, and mainly we will talk about the boat building tradition in Pasuruan, about the technique, the materials and the tools, and also about the transfer of knowledge. We will touch a little bit about archaeological sites, and we will conclude with a few remarks. I will start with the map of our survey area for who you may not familiar with Indonesia. So we are here on the East Java. The red rectangle here is our survey area, and this presentation today basically is 1/3 of an archaeological project called the Dynamic of Maritime Cultural Landscape in Brantas River Delta from the 11th to the 20th century CE. You can see on the map, this is the River Brantas. This is a second longest river in Java, and has been a very big influence in the development of culture in the surrounded area. So the project itself aims to study the connectivity between the inland and the coastal of East Java in the past through the Brantas River system. We mainly did 3 parts within the project. The first one is the terrestrial survey along the river's 2 branches. And the second one is what we are presenting today, the Ethno Archaeological study of the traditional boat and ship buildings. And the third is the underwater survey using the side scan sonar and scuba diving. So it is quite a large project actually, but this morning we will emphasize on the ethnoarchaeological study that we did, especially to the ethnographic part of this study. So we started this project in 2019. During the first field work, we visited one boatyard in Samare. It's over here, and we decided to kind of like follow up that first survey. We couldn't go for field work last year, of course, because of the pandemic. But this year we managed to visit Pasuruan, the area, and surveyed 5 boatyards along the coast from the west to the east of Pasuruan. So during the initial survey in 2019, we noticed that the boatyard in Pasuruan, they were and still are using the shell-first constructions. It is the quite old traditions, and majorly only using the dowels for the plank fastening. And that is one of the reason we decided to visit that certain boatyard again, and also visited 4 other boatyards. For the data collection, so we did interviews in all the boat and shipyards along the coast of Pasuruan. We had a very long talk with the boat builders, and we took audio and visual documentation as well as textual documentations. And our primary informant for this project is Salman, Mr. Salman from Seramiko village. And we also observe the process of the boat buildings. And for this project, we kind of like treated the traditional boat as some kind of shipwreck site. So we conducted the observations using the nautical archaeology perspective. And for the documentation, we took videos, photos, and also written recordings. As I said before, so the boat builders are still using the shell-first constructions. For you who may be familiar with the terminology, so they start the boat building process by laying the keel, and at the time that we visited the shipyards, they were making a 12-meter long boat. So for that particular boat, the keel consisted of 3 pieces of timber and joined by a combination of dowels and iron nails. And you can see here kind of like 2 types of joinery, one over here, and the other ones are on these 2 pictures. And the keel itself is neither riveted or beveled, so this is just a straight cut, and then they drill the holes for the first strake or garboard strake. And one of very interesting process that we were fortunate enough to witness was the bending the plank process. So the planks were shaped into a desired curve by firing, and be held and or weighted down using rope, stones, and timber pieces. So you can see like the system over here, and you can see they put like timber piece to kind of like to hold the timber in place, and there's another piece over here also to help the timbers. And you can see here they put large stones to weight down the planks. So and they move the planks 2 to 3 times to get the desired curvature. And after that, of course, after the keel, they start to build up the strakes, and 1 strake generally consists of 3 planks, sometimes 4. And the planks were joined on the seams, so no overlapping planks. And the planks were joined using dowels and sometimes iron nails. And we will talk a little bit about the fastenings. So the primary fastenings for the planks are dowels and packs. And in this slide, you can see the system they use to kind of like understand where the plank should go. So the lines over here, it's not very clear because they were drawn using pencils over here, but you can see they use systematical kind of like distance to put all the dowels on the planks. And you can see over here the dowels they use for the planks. They use these smaller dowels, and the larger ones go for the a bit like a wing end of the boat. And they made special tools, you can say, to kind of like shape the dowels, like you can see over here. And the dowels were made from a sickle-bus tree, so you can see here. So the tree itself has like at least three different colors. So at first we thought that the dowels were made from several species of trees, but well, in fact, it is only from one species of tree. And you can see here, because the natural color of the tree itself, it produces different colors of dowels. And so in our primary informant boat yard, so the Salman's boat yard, he only uses dowels for the planks. But when we visited other boat yards, we found out that other boat builders were using the combinations of dowels and iron nails. And if you recall the previous slide, I show you like the system they used to kind of like mark the position of the dowels. And of course, when they were using two types of fastenings, they use different marks. So like for here, you can clearly see for the iron nails, they added like a circle to kind of like distinguish it from others, for other marks. And yeah, well, basically, when we asked the boat builders, they said that primarily they only use dowels or tree nails, but in the modern times, like right now, many customers ask to add iron nails for the boat. So the boat builders kind of like follow the customers' demand. And so on the seam, they kind of like put epoxy and wood powder. So it's a combination of epoxy and wood powder. It acts as additional fastenings on the seam of the planks, but also acts as the watertight layers. And over here, this chante is like the original name they use to kind of like refer to the end piece over here. It's slightly different to a stem or a stern post because this piece over here consists of a few pieces of timbers stacked on top of each other, and but later it being shaped into a pointy end resembling a stem or a stern post, like you can see over here. So later I will show you like the finished product of the boat, and if you see it, it looks like a one piece of timber, but actually it consists of a few pieces over here, and then the chante, this is something like can only be shaped and decorated by the master builders. So the in a boat yard or shipyard, usually there is one master builders and like two or 3 apprentices, but the apprentice, they are not allowed to kind of like touch the chante. They can only kind of like put it in place, but the shape and the decoration is can only be done by the master builders. And oh yeah, I would like to add, sorry, I have to go back. So the chante itself, it's a particular system to kind of like make this piece, because after the builder lays the keel, and then they put like the first stack of the chante. And then as the strakes were building up, they add more timbers on top of the previous one to kind of like accommodate the strakes. And after they finish with the strakes, and then they put the frames, and one frame consists of a floor timber and 2 top timbers. And for the frames, they use only iron nails for fastening. So the dowels is exclusive for the plank only. And I will pass on to Wibi to continue the presentation. Wibi, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Agni. I will continue from here. So from what we observed in this project, we found that the tools that being used in this boat building tradition is very unique, similar to in other places such as Pinisi boat builder in Sulawesi. They use the combination between traditional and modern tools, where the modern tools they use that to help the heavy lifting jobs such as cutting woods and drilling holes using electric device, while the traditional tools they will use we can go to the next slide. Next please, Agni.
Is it changing?
Not yet.
No? Sorry. Is it
Okay.
now?
Yeah. This is the traditional tools that still being used in Pasuruan. It's called rel in the left side, and the right side you can call it sipat. It's basically tools that help you to get the best shape of the wood by trimming the uneven edge from the side of the woods. So it's traditional but quite effective to help you to make a watertight boat. Okay, next slide, please. As for the materials, as Agni said before, for the dowels, they use sickle bush since it more flexible and strong enough to hold 2 strakes together or to hold the strake to the keel. But for the keel and planks and another part and also frames, they use thick. It's also similar in another boat building site in around north coast of Java, where they use this kind of boats for its strength and also its durability. And also it's still able to be shaped in desirable curvature and shapes of the boats, depend on where it will be used, in the river or in the sea. So this is very strong and flexible material. Okay, next. Oh, we have 5 more minutes. And this is the almost finished shape of the boat without the other parts and without the machine, but you can see the chantik is already finished, and then the hull itself is complete, still waiting for the paint job or coloration, but it depends on the customer. So also the name, and then they're still waiting for the ceremonies to release the boat in the sea. Okay, we go to the next slide. And this is one of the most important parts of this project, is to understand how the transfer of knowledge passed on from generation to generation. As you can see, most of the shipyard is located in backyard or near the house of the boat builder. So basically the ship or boat yard become center of activities place for the family. Mother will be there to cleaning fishes and shellfish. Children will be playing there, and the father and sons will working the boat itself. And that's the unique part of this site in Pasuruan. We can go to the next slide. In this particular place is most of the boat builders are male, and they transfer their knowledge of the boats to the sons or sons-in-law or niece if they don't have son. So this is very interesting because in more modern part of the Java, such as in Rembang, the sons usually don't involve in the boat building tradition, but they will manage the business. But in this part of Pasuruan, they still help to working in daily activity. The next slide, please. And the apprentice will start since very young, maybe teen or 20s, and they will help around a couple of years before they will start to make their own small boat. And so on. It's basically like a few years of college boat making tradition with the parents and with the fathers or grandfathers, something like that. But another important fact is that in Pasuruan, if a young boat builder start to make his own shipyard, usually when they don't have workers or they don't have any family members that's strong enough, or their sons is still toddler, the wife will help to make the boat and to do anything related to make the dowels or help with the wood bending process and everything. So, and then when they have sons or they have a son-in-law, the wife will leave the job and the sons or son-in-law will taking over. So it's quite unique. We found that fact in several of our informants. And to the next slide. And this is the depiction of archaeological sites in maybe Southeast Asia. You can see like a high concentration of both findings in around Sumatra and few in north coast of Java, but we still haven't found any traditional or ancient boat maybe in Brantas River Delta, which is quite unique because as we know, since the early century, this part of Java become very busy for trade and voyage, but we still don't have any archaeological finding. But this ethnographical approach is very important for us to help the researcher or archaeologists to understand that this ancient technique, the shell first construction, it still exists in this part of Java. Next slide, please. And also for the remarks that, as the Agni mentioned before, this project helps a lot in how archaeologists try to understand the boat building process or how to make the ancient boat, even though we still lack the findings in the East Java area. But in general, in Java in general, they still use the similar technique, which is shell first construction. And this ethnographical approach is very helpful to help us solve any question regarding to the technique, especially the measurement and how they curve the planks and everything. And then the second important part is the importance to documenting the knowledge of the master boat builder, because you can imagine all of these boats were made without any drawing, without any blueprint. So the master boat builders need depth knowledge of the boat structure, and then he need the capabilities to imagine the shape of the. It's quite challenging and very difficult to understand. So this is why we think it is very important for us to documenting this tradition where it still lives. Okay, to the next slide. Maybe you will deliver this, Agni.
Oh yeah, okay, Vivi. Thank you. So yeah, we would like to thank many people who helped us during this project. Of course, the first, Salman and his family were very generous to us, accepting us with a wide open arms. And then also other boat builders that we interviewed, Mr. Salasin, Mr. Sodik, Mr. Hamid, Mr. Siari, and Mr. Muntawib. Also Asa and Soim, our other team members, and also the Maritime Grantas team who supported us during the field work. And last but not least, of course, to the Pasuruan district government. And I just realized one mistake that we made. We mentioned nieces instead of nephews when we explained about the transfer of knowledge earlier. So sorry, we were sleep deprived when we kind of like made this presentation, and we would like to end this presentation by showing you the final product. So this is one of the finished boats we found in Pasuruan, and we are closing this with saying thank you, terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Thank you very much, Agni. It's very and Vivi. It's very interesting, and actually, I think the knowledge that you collect through this stage of the research will be really useful for the region, because certainly there's still many areas in Southeast Asia that using this kind of boat. I visited some areas, but it's very interesting that in Indonesia you have the research that collect this kind of information, while other it's not really systematic. Okay, so
thank you. We hope
yeah.
so. Yeah.
Come back to Q&A session. Actually, may I start from Dr. Galloway? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So actually, there is a comment from Facebook from Semyolin from Myanmar. And you already give some response, but I'm not sure if she can see because the questions are from our Facebook. It's a comment that there is local community representatives at technical coordinator meeting in Pakan, but you may not notice we are a technical support team, which are a group of local engineers focused on survey, measure, and producing drawing for more than 20 monuments. TST is still operation some projects without any financial support from international. We are not asking for financial aid, but we do need technical support. Do you have any response on this?
Yes, there is, as I said, when we were talking about Bagan as perhaps not being such a successful model with community engagement, there are activities where with the technical teams in particular, and I think we mentioned this in the paper, that the technical side is where a lot of the emphasis is placed on community engagement, and that there are these groups working with the Department of Archaeology to add some extra support for that staff. So that is a great way of getting some information about heritage activities back to their community through their families and professional group. But there's still a lot to be done to engage the broader community with understanding, best practice methods for managing heritage. And I see Susu is with us now, so she might have something else to add there, because Susu's also been involved with more of that technical activity through her work as an architect.
Susu, do you have any additional comments?
Not for this one. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is that in terms of the heritage education in Myanmar, what's about the traditional way of learning for heritage practice at this present time? Is there
traditional
still
methods of
traditional way of learning
heritage? Yeah,
like particularly for like a Buddhist heritage, which in the past it's more like a traditional way of learning the knowledge transfer within the community. But what's about the situation now?
Again, Susie, would you like me to answer, or do you want to say something when we start?
Yeah, it's fine if you answer, and I can add in if necessary.
Okay. Yeah. There is the traditional, like at Bagan, for example, we have traditional lacquer making. So there is a heritage, and that is passed down through families, through traditional learning practices. And I was interested in the talk about the pottery and the Philippines, because I put up a question too. I wonder if a similar thing has happened in Twante, the pottery making region, whether there's been an increase in activity there during this pandemic period. But what is the issue, I think, more with the heritage activities is there is not a very strong link between the official side of managing and supporting community-based heritage and these traditional learning activities. And so it's how we can bring those more together. There's support there's been a lot of work in intangible cultural heritage to support documentation activities as well, which is really helping to, as I said, make note of what's happening in heritage in Myanmar, because as we all know, so much is changing and traditional methods are changing, and we're trying to capture that moment in time. But there is not a great link between, as I said, the official support for these activities and those more traditional learning activities, which have been heritage activities, which have been handed down for generations. Susu?
Hello. Yeah, I think it's perfect answer.
Okay, I think yeah. I think this is the last question. From the presentation, it can be seen that the heritage educational issues mentioned, it's really focused on archaeological heritage and the Buddhist sites, religious sites, and but for the perception of the heritage nowadays includes the other kind of heritage, like historic building in the old towns in Yangon. So what about the situation of the heritage education in the other areas beyond the World Heritage properties like Bagan and PU, which is more like archaeologically?
There has been, as I said, there's been a lot of capacity building across the country, but it is very fragmented. I mean, there's been a great rise in the number of regional cultural museums, and some of them are terrific. You know, the local communities have brought together traditional examples of, basket weaving through to making tools and so on. And they've been doing a fantastic job. I mean, for this presentation, we had to sort of narrow the focus a little bit. Which is why we focused on the main archaeology sites. But in some ways, some of those regional cultural museums when they've had perhaps good outside support for developing capacity building, they've done really well in those local efforts. But again, there's not a national strategy for supporting this. It's very much what's happening, and get some donor funding or, and interested experts to support that. But as I mentioned in the paper, we have to say, people are very keen to learn more about their heritage and preserve it and display it. And it's how we coordinate those efforts and take advantage of the enthusiasm for it.
Any more input from Susu?
Yeah, even for Yangon heritage and other things, we are eager to proceed more or less in this kind of situation. So there are many Zoom trainings and upcoming one we are planning for youth of Myanmar and a wider audience. So in one way or another, in one organization jointly with one organization and many other ways. So yeah, we are trying the most possible ways.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we move to Rhayan. You have, I think you also respond a question, but just to share to the other audience who are watching us from Facebook Live. The first question is that, what are the supports being given by the local government units in Bohol to sustain traditional pottery making in Bohol? And is cultural preservation through education and training parts of it? This is from Benio Glenn Ricaforte.
Oh, thank you for that question. Actually, the LGU and the national government is supporting the local potters of Bohol in many different ways. Like, for example, the LGU, the municipalities or towns would allow the potters to have a special place in the market to sell their products. They're not being driven away. As a matter of fact, they're given a specific place just for them to sell their products. That's one. In one of the towns in Bohol, specifically in Calape, the national government introduced pottery techniques that are new to them. For example, kiln firing. It was introduced to the potters, but that the potters themselves are not keen because they prefer their old traditional way. They're also support. The government also gave them some financial support. Yes, there was before the pandemic, they were given a little capital, because you need a little capital to do some pottery making, because you need to buy clay, you need to buy temper, fuel, and some other things. Also, what I really love about pottery making, all of Bohol, pottery making is an identity for them. So it is being promoted not just by the town, but by the village themselves. As a matter of fact, their village emblem is always a picture of a pot. So it is being celebrated, and it is being represented, in their village. But in terms of training, actually that's my next plan after the pandemic, because in one of the village in Bohol, specifically in Albuquerque, the pottery making tradition is dying, because as of 2018, there are only six remaining traditional potters in the village. So my plan actually is to get some financial assistance so that I could entice young ones to I would make the training I would incentivize it, because I think that would give a little motivation for people to join in the training that I'm trying to start, in particularly in Albuquerque. For the other three villages, there is no problem. Pottery making is very, very alive. Actually, it is stay for 2 more generations, especially with the new trend where young ones are motivated to learn, because they saw that it is financially rewarding. So it gave them a little push to start learning it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
actually, yeah, you are very right. And then we can also think about the creative economy, which can be also added value for the traditional ways of making pottery as well. Thank you for this question. The next question is from Bob Hassan. Ryan, how do prices compare in the local economy between crafted pottery and similar manufactured goods? Do the consumers see pottery as a good economic choice? And were any social attitudes stated during your research, such as I support local pottery because it is our tradition, or maybe food tasted better if it is cooked in a traditional clay pot like grandmother did it?
Yes, actually, Professor Hudson is really correct, because I've noticed that the prices for all the 4 pottery community is the same, because technically they're competing with each other. They know each other. They know each other, so that to make the prices competitive, they try to be of the same price. Now, for the second question, is it economically viable to use pottery over other stuff, for example, plastic or metal pots? It depends. In terms of clay stoves and clay flower pots, it is more economic if you use the clay stoves and clay flower pots. It's much cheaper because gas fuel in the Philippines is a little bit pricier. So the locals in Bohol is also because of the fact that there are a lot of free fuel in Bohol, in this particular island. So people are still very interesting. They still use the clay stoves over. A lot of them still use it over gas fuel. But in terms of cooking pot, the reason is more traditional. It's more living the old past, because it is more economic if you use a metal pot. But Professor Hudson is correct. It's that the food tastes better if you cook it in a clay pot, because number one, it's slow cook, so the flavor of the food really comes out. Secondly, the food cooked in a clay pot does not react with the clay pot compared to metal pots, because especially in the Philippines, one of our traditional or one of our famous food is sinigang, which is actually acid-based soup. So if you cook that in a metal pot, and that's acid, so this is chemistry 101. It reacts with metal pot. But if you use a clay pot for cooking acid-based soup, it tastes better. And plus, of course, people are nostalgic of the past. That's why for clay stove and flower pot, it's economic. But for cooking pot, it's social and it's nostalgia for the locals. Thank you.
Thank you. So actually, we are going to run out the time. So may I move to Agni? So there's a question from Lian Lethi to Agni. Do you find any information on the way of making main mast for the ancient ship?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lian, for the question. Particularly for this part in East Java, they no longer use a mast and a sail. So most of them, or we can say all of them, are using a modern machine today. So we couldn't find any mast or sail making at the area. They of course still use rudder, and we managed to document the rudder also. But yeah, there is no mast and sail. But I believe there is another area in Indonesia, in different islands. They are still using mast and sails. So probably that means we should have another projects in a different area. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Agni. Actually, we have the last question, but it's it will take a little bit time. So I will read out. It's the questions for everyone from Mark, Lichi, Celsius, Shwin, Chuan. I think I'm sorry if I have not really right pronunciation. So for his question, he said, presented manifestations of cultural heritage conservation efforts are effective if there are plural voices, especially in statements of significance from official voices. So based on your studies, were there instances of such? If so, what do you think are the effective ways to deal with these instances? And then following by with heritage are memories and narratives. But what if there are competing ones? Given the variety of interests, how can we forward efforts to value heritage when there are evidence of fragmentation and rival interests? Which narratives or memories shall prevail in connection to heritage? So may I ask you take like no more than 2 minutes for each person. May I start from Dr. Galloway and then Rhayan and followed by Agni?
I think that is the question that is not quite so easily answered, because all of those issues are certainly ones which we do see in Myanmar, like we do in other countries as well. Certainly just thinking about that second one of managing heritage and everyone's different narratives. And I think, and I'll take this out of the Myanmar context now, but I think this is something that happens in many, particularly developing countries, where there are competing interests at different times. And I think there are many parts of the world where they struggle with managing, giving voice to different voices, to different community groups, because of the sort of perhaps imbalances in power and the political situations everywhere. I don't think there's any easy answer. And I go back to that first part about I think it was about significance. When you do have a good linkage, an open linkage and public education, where local groups can take more control and understand how to document their ICH practices and have them recognized, that's actually and a way of ensuring some sort of survival, and people understanding that what they might think are everyday activities are actually really significant is part of that process. And I think there's a lot of communities that don't realize how significant the significance in that World Heritage context, how to even assess that. So again, that comes back to some of that community education programs. But it does need government and well as local government support and upskilling of people within communities to undertake those ICH assessments themselves.
Thank you. So Rhayan?
I agree with Dr. Galloway that this is a little bit tricky question. And given 2 minutes, my answer would be for pottery making in Bohol. I think it depends on the people, the locals, if they want to preserve and conserve it, especially in terms of pottery making. In Talibon, Calape, and Valencia, pottery making is now safe. It's thriving. It's alive because the young ones are into it, especially now that they saw that it's profitable. But in one of the towns, which is actually in Albuquerque, pottery making became a victim of its own success. What do I mean by this? The old potters were able to send their children to school and obtain a college degree. That's why when I check all of their kids, most of them are well educated, they have formal education. And when I ask them one by one, they know how to do it, but they don't do it really as a full-time job. Actually, a lot of them would just help their parents do it once in a while. So they're not really motivated to continue it because of the fact that they have formal education, they have other type of employment, and they feel that employment is more economically viable compared to pottery making. So that's my opinion. Like, if they really want it, it will be there. Because remember, in one of the towns, the government introduced kiln firing. They introduced this kind of techniques, but the people said no thanks, because they really want to preserve their own traditional way of pottery making. Thank you.
You, Agni?
Yes, thank you. So interestingly enough, I do have an example of that statement. So yeah, this project in particular is part of a maritime archaeology project. And even though it has been said many times, the Indonesia has a very long maritime history, but it was kind of like overlooked for a very long time. And it wasn't until our current president, Mr. Joko Widodo, who in around 2014, if I'm not mistaken, kind of like decided that maritime culture is also an important part of our country, and it began to attract interest from many people. And as a consequences, one of the consequences, we archaeologists who previously has been kind of like shouting out loud about the maritime archaeology, and we were kind of like ignored before, and then suddenly we can do and we got more attention by doing a maritime archaeology project, not just archaeology, of course, but maritime tradition and culture in general in our country. And that is exactly a good example, I guess, about you know, the official voices kind of like stating that, okay, maritime is a good and an important part of our nation, and suddenly after that we get easier access to funding, and also get a better attention by doing this kind of project. And also for the second questions about the narratives of heritage, and I also commend our not new, but like our current law of cultural conservation, or heritage law, to be easier. It moved the center of attention. Before, the previous law was kind of like intended to kind of like manage the heritage in a national scope, but the current law kind of like suggests that the heritage is managed by local government. And I think it is a very wise and good decision, because it will be, you know, it will be more related if we kind of like build narratives to between the heritage and the people who lives nearby or in a surrounding area, instead of kind of like talk about it in a national scope, because Indonesia itself is very diverse. So sometimes it's hard to kind of like ask one people from one island to kind of like connect themselves to heritage in a faraway island. So I think it is a very good move to kind of like decided that the heritage, it should be managed locally. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So actually, we are going to finish the session 3-1 for today, and I have to thank all presenters, Agni, Rhayan, Professor Galloway, Susu, and Vibi, and also our audience who are also here with us in our webinar, and also who are watching us from our live Facebook. Before we finish, may I remind for the audience that we will start next session at noon sharp, session 3 to 4 today. So thank you very much, and see you in the next 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.